Welcome to The Two-Handed Economist. I'm John Diamond from Rice University's Baker Institute. This show gives you what a one-handed economist can, both sides of the argument. We're not here to repeat sound bites. We're here to give you the full picture. Today is Wednesday, October 1st, and the government shut down last night at midnight. We will discuss what that means. In addition, a week ago, the Department of Homeland Security put out new proposed rules on H-1B visas. So I have more to say about H-1B visas and the proposed rules. Let's start by discussing the shutdown. Who's to blame? Who will be impacted, and how long will it last? Should this even be allowed? Let's dig right in. Who's to blame? Well, that's simple. Shutdowns should almost always be avoided by passing a clean continuing resolution. So whoever is using the process to get policy concessions by holding the rest of us hostage to the situation are at fault. And in this case, it's the Democrats. And it's especially true in this case for some additional reasons. First, enhanced premium tax credits under the Affordable Care Act were first enacted in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 as a temporary 2-year provision. They were later extended through 2025 in the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. Both measures passed on a strictly partisan basis without a single Republican vote in support. Democrats framed the provisions as needed relief during the pandemic, while Republicans warned they were a stepping stone to permanent entitlement expansion. Partisan policies should not be extended by leveraging the negative economic effects of shutdowns. Instead, if the Democrats want to extend these policies, they should take the issue to voters and win at the ballot box. Second, extending these subsidies would represent a meaningful increase in the size and scope of the federal government compared to pre-pandemic levels. What was originally justified as temporary relief during an emergency would be institutionalized as ongoing federal spending. This carries significant budgetary implications, increasing annual outlays and expanding government commitments in health care without bipartisan agreement or a long-term financing plan. Similarly, the current debate is unfolding not through the regular budget process, but in the context of a government shutdown standoff. Democrats have tied extension of the subsidies to must-pass continuing resolution legislation, effectively using the threat of a shutdown as leverage. This raises concerns about governance. Major policy expansions should be considered through regular order, with committee hearings, transparent debate, and opportunities to evaluate costs and trade-offs. Embedding them in short-term funding bills under crisis conditions undermines fiscal discipline and public accountability. Regardless of the merits of expanding health insurance subsidies, the process matters. Extending pandemic-era provisions that passed without bipartisan support, using leverage instead of debate, is bad for the political process and institutional credibility. Moreover, shutdown brinkmanship often leads to fiscal irresponsibility and negative economic consequence for many through no fault of their own. A more sustainable approach would be to pursue changes through the normal budget process, allowing for bipartisan input and a clearer assessment of long-term fiscal impacts. In fact, we should enact legislation that makes a current resolution at current funding levels automatic and end the shutdowns for good. Neither party should be allowed to use these to further their political ends. So, who is impacted by a government shutdown? Let's discuss a few previous government shutdowns to get a sense of the impacts and the politics that are at play. The longest government shutdown in U.S. history lasted 35 days, from December 22, 2018 to January 25th of 2019. At the center of the standoff was President Donald Trump's demand for $5.7 billion in funding for a U.S.-Mexico border wall. Democrats, newly in control of the House as of January 2019, refused to fund the border wall in the appropriations bill. The stalemate closed much of the government for over a month, leaving hundreds of thousands of federal workers furloughed or working without pay. In the end, political pressure and growing public frustration forced a retreat. President Trump signed a short-term continuing resolution to reopen the government without border wall funding. The agreement provided back pay to federal employees, but later in January, Senate Republicans voted against back pay for federal contractors. Trump signed a spending bill 3 weeks later that was the result of bipartisan agreement, which included $1.4 billion of border wall funding. Then Trump declared a national emergency in an effort to get the full funding he sought for the border wall. CBO estimated this government shutdown reduced real U.S. GDP by about $11 billion over the following 2 quarters, including approximately $3 billion in permanent losses. The Republicans were wrong in this case, and the effects were that federal workers, businesses that contract with the federal government, and anyone in areas where federal workers live in large numbers, all were losers from the shutdown. The second longest shutdown occurred under President Bill Clinton from December 16, 1995 to January 6, 1996, lasting 21 days. It followed an earlier 5-day shutdown in November of 1995, both driven by a clash between Clinton and Republican Speaker Newt Gingrich's Congress. Republicans sought deep domestic spending cuts, welfare reform, and changes to Medicare as part of their balanced budget push. Clinton resisted, insisting on protecting social programs. The prolonged standoff damaged both sides politically, but ultimately Republicans accepted a spending deal closer to Clinton's priorities. The episode is often remembered as a demonstration that forcing sweeping policy concessions through a shutdown rarely works. The third longest shutdown stretched from October 1st to October 17th of 2013, during President Obama's second term. With a Democratic Senate and a Republican-controlled House, the dispute revolved around Republican efforts to delay or defund the Affordable Care Act. House Republicans attached anti-ACA provisions to continuing resolutions, which the Senate rejected. The deadlock shuttered the government for over 2 weeks, furloughing 800,000 federal workers and drawing heavy public criticism. The impasse ended when Congress passed the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2014, which reopened the government without altering the ACA. The fight reinforced the difficulty of using shutdowns as leverage for policy changes, as Republicans failed to extract concessions on health care. There have been 14 shutdowns since 1979, not including the current shutdown. 10 of those lasted 5 days or less. The other 4 lasted 35 days, 21 days, 16 days, and 11 days. There has been little success in using shutdowns to pass or influence policy. It's time we end this game of chicken. We should end the debt ceiling debacles as well while we're at it. Let's move on to H-1B visas. I have a bit more to say on this topic. On September 24th, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security published a proposal to amend its regulations governing the process by which U.S. citizenship and immigration services selects who gets H-1B visas. This was published in the Federal Register. Recall that under today's rules, USCIS receives far more registrations than the 85,000 H-1 visas allowed by law, which is broken into 65,000 regular visas and 20,000 that are reserved for those with advanced degrees. From 2020 to fiscal year 2024, USCIS averaged about 320,000 eligible registrations per year. That means each registrant has roughly a 29.6% chance of selection. Every registrant, regardless of wage level, is treated equally in the current lottery. As a result, many low-wage positions end up being selected in large numbers. These are often submitted by computer and IT staffing firms. On average, about 26,600 Level 1 petitions are selected each year under the process. The registrations are allocated into 4 levels. Level 1 represents the lowest wage group, which is representative of entry-level positions. Level 4 represents high-skilled, high-wage jobs. Under the current random lottery, most H-1B visas are awarded to lower wage levels, especially levels 1 and 2. Based on DHS's 5-year averages from fiscal year 2020 through fiscal year 2024, about 28% of selected positions are level 1 and 55% are level 2. Together, that means roughly 83% of all H-1B visas go to the lowest 2 wage categories. By contrast, only about 12% go to level 3 and about 5% to level 4. This is almost certainly inconsistent with the idea of U.S. firms hiring high-skilled foreign workers that they cannot find in the U.S., and instead looks like a way to substitute low-wage foreign workers for higher-wage U.S. workers. The New York Fed reports that the unemployment rate for recent college graduates is 4.8%, and for all young workers, it's 7%, the highest since December 2014. So it definitely seems like there are workers available for these entry-level positions that firms could be hiring. The new proposal would weight lottery entries by wage level. A level 1 beneficiary would get 1 ticket in the lottery. Level 2 would get 2 tickets. Level 3, 3 tickets. And level 4, the highest wage group, would get 4 tickets. Using historical registration data, DHS estimates that under this system, the odds of being selected would vary by wage: 15% for level 1, 31% for level 2, 46% for level 3, and 61% for level 4. This system is designed to favor high-wage, more specialized positions, shifting visas away from lower-paid entry roles. Because the total number of visas issued is capped at 85,000, the shift comes entirely from who is selected. DHS estimates that level 1 petitions would fall from about 26,600 under the current random system to about 15,300 under the weighted system, a reduction of more than 10,000 visas to the lowest wage group. The share going to levels 2, 3, and 4 would increase. The proposed weighting system is designed to rebalance the distribution. In percentage terms, the combined share of levels 1 and 2 would fall from 83% to 74%, while levels 3 and 4 would rise from 17 to 26%. DHS frames this change as a way to prioritize high-skilled, high-paid foreign workers and reduce reliance on the program for low-wage staffing models. The current random system favors employers that flood the lottery with large numbers of low-wage registrations, often through outsourcing firms. By weighting odds toward higher wage levels, DHS seeks to better align the H-1B program with its statutory purpose of addressing specialty occupation labor shortages, and to ensure that visas go to positions offering stronger economic contributions and less downward pressure on U.S. wage standards. This is a step in the right direction. The big question is, does it go far enough? So here's the takeaway from this week. Takeaway 1, shutdowns are bad governance. Using them as leverage for partisan policy fights, like the ACA subsidies, hurts the economy and the public. We need automatic, continuing resolutions and real debate, not crisis politics. Takeaway 2, shutdowns don't work. History shows that the shutdowns in 95, 2013, and 2019 caused pain, cost billions, and ended with no major wins for the side forcing them. They're political dead ends. Takeaway 3, on H-1B visas, DHS is finally moving in the right direction, weighting the lottery toward higher wage, higher skilled jobs makes sense. The big question is whether the reforms go far enough to stop the gaming of the system. That's it for this week's episode of The Two-Handed Economist. Thanks for tuning in. The Two-Handed Economist is a production of the Baker Institute for Public Policy, recorded on the campus of Rice University in Houston, Texas. Production support was provided by Shannon Moriarty and Karina Zimmel. You can access show notes and other podcasts at bakerinstitute.org/podcast. If you like what you hear, leave us a review. It helps other listeners find the show. Until next time.